This is really different. So although I feel like I had two really, well, maybe three really important papers last year, and the other two are in this one, but it's not going to be data like you saw before, so it's not like a science article. But a lot of what I spend my time doing, I actually have another really big science paper that I'm trying to write right now. But I keep going around talking about AI ethics, and I think part of the reason there's a lot of confusion about AI ethics is because of this concept of over-identification. So this is a talk where I'm going to try to confuse you. I'm going to try to convince you that that might be part of the reason we have issues with understanding artificial intelligence. All right. So the outline of our goals is to convince you that AI is actually already here, and it is a threat, but not in the way that most people think. Then I'll give 5 reasons that it's a bad idea to make people think robots are people. And then finally, I'm going to describe research programs to help overcome over-identification. So I'll talk a bit more about the research in my group. My Bath group, not the, my Princeton sabbatical thing. All right, so, yeah, you guys could already guess this from the from the previous talk, so I'll just kind of motor through that. In fact, you even saw this before, unless any of you came in. Has anyone come in new? No, okay, so I'll just assume everybody's seen this. But note the stuff that I'm talking about in this version of this slide, which is that people keep saying, "Oh, when is AI going to be human-like?" And I think it's been human. Human-like is different to human level, and I would say we've been at human level about 7 years ago. That was actually because of a great talk I saw, just talking about how good of computation you get for amount of energy and hardware and stuff like that, right? But anyway, what's really happened in the last couple of years that nobody can deny is that we're getting to the point that, with chess and Go, but also speech transcription, lip reading, deception detection from posture. You can tell someone is lying from their handwriting, from the way they stand. This stuff is superhuman, right? We can do stuff that we couldn't do before, including forging video, right? So forging handwriting, the AI is better than humans now. But humans never could forge video, right? That's not one of those things we do, right? This goes back. So I would say, and generally knowing stuff, books know stuff better than we do. I mean, that's not even a particularly complicated technology. All right. So it's the same slide you guys saw before, but I'm just talking about the different thing, which is human-level AI. All right? And I'm saying it's already here. Okay. So this is real intelligence, all right? And I can't believe, you get people coming and saying, oh, driverless cars, they have to do planning, they have to do perception, they have to, manipulate things in real time, but that's not real intelligence. It's like, and these are the same guys, and I'm talking about a particular professor, I think I could say his name, Tony Belpany. He came from the autonomous agents community that said, real intelligence is handling the real world and making plans and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, yeah, now we have it in driverless cars, yeah.
But isn't intelligence like a moving target all the time? Intelligence is a thing that we just can't get at the moment? I mean, chess used to be...
I'm glad you asked. Okay, intelligence. This is a definition that we used to use. Both, it was what I was taught in Edinburgh at AI, but it's also quite congruent with the ones that we use in psychology. It's basically, what is the difference between like a more or less intelligent animal, and it's the extent to which it's able to alter its behavior to a particular context. Okay? So the point is, I'm not using the word intelligent to mean human-like. You can, and many people do, but for the purpose of this talk, I'm going to use a more specific, you're intelligent, like you're tall, or like you're heavy, right? And in that sense of intelligent, this is how intelligent you are. It's how well you can respond to the opportunities of the environment and the changing environment. So to do that, you need to be able to detect the context, right? Perception, action, and you sort of associate these. And psychologists, as I mentioned before, are kind of obsessed with the association part, which is part of the reason that we kind of believe in causality, which makes less sense when you look at systems in general. And I've already talked about general intelligence being a myth, and I already showed this slide, but it was in case anybody else hadn't been in the previous talk. So, all right. Okay. Yes?
Sorry, coming back to your 3 points. So we had perception and action, and what was the third one?
And associating. So you need to. So all of these, all 3 components of these, as it says, require computation. But also, if you improve any of these, you're winning. So if you can detect. So one of the things you're doing with students is you're trying to help them discriminate contexts they didn't see before, right? Like, as well as learn new skills.
So normally I would think about more like also like the learning component, but do you think like learning is like in that context the same as the association that you have? Because you
Right.
need
Well, that's what I'm trying to say.
ability in there, right?
The learning occurs across all of these, right? So like I said, you learn these skills, you come to discriminate different contexts that you hadn't recognized, that especially if you go to another country, right? You suddenly realize that there's a subtle difference in the way people are feeling about things, and actually it's totally different contexts, and you should be behaving differently, right? But that's, again, it's a large part of what becoming expert is recognizing particular contexts that you can express a particular action and do well, right? So yeah, so as we mentioned before, computation is a physical process, and I already mentioned this, and this is the pop psych version of this to death, right? In 9 months you go from here to here, even if you only have two, if you're only splitting in two, but okay. So why do people think that artificial intelligence failed, given that kind of background, right? And I think the big thing is identification, that we identify as intelligent. That's something that we think is separating us from the other animals, right? And in particular, the reason I use this to illustrate as about identification is that when you look at this, you find it super freaky, and there's no CPUs here. There's like a pole, and they shake the pole, and she seems to dance. And I even say she. I'm more careful with robots. This is not even a robot, right? But, depending on how you define robot. I wouldn't call it a robot without the intelligence, and there's no linking of thoughts into action here. But it's constrained, so it only moves in the ways that a human would move. And you can kind of tell this even from a still, that this is like a potential human pose, and so then you feel slightly weirded out. You have an uncanny valley association with some blocks of wood and a dress, right? So that's what identification is. And we do identify even with statues, even with stuffed animals, with no intelligence whatsoever, right? So people want very badly to build AI, not everybody, of course, but quite a lot of people really, really want to believe that there's something we can do in terms of making life, really. And it is a little, as you can tell, it can be a little sick, and there's people that are really campaigning about this now, about what is it teaching kids if their nanny they can turn off and on? What is it teaching people about relationships if they have lovers that they can turn off and on? Right, that they own, that they bought, and then they turn off and on. There was already people that argued that paying for sex contributed to objectifying of women and making them seem like something that's a purchasable asset rather than as an equal. But if you have something that looks a lot like a woman and then you're paying for it and you're turning it on and off, right? What are you doing, right? So think about it. What do we want? I told you this is the more esoteric one. To live forever, friends that will never betray us, and successful children, things like that, right? Why do we want that stuff? Because we're alive, right? That's almost the definition of life. In fact, I bias it a little bit. It's pretty much the definition of life. Persistence is something we want, and a lot of people right now are talking about doing this with AI. They're talking about whole brain uploading and things like that for perpetual life. As if there was a technology that lasts 80 years, right? Anybody carrying anything with them that's like 80 years old? Yes? Somebody with a good watch, or is it a question?
I've got a Nazi calling on me for some reason.
Oh, really? That's 80 years old now. Wow. Okay. Wow. Okay. No, you could potentially have a pocket watch that would still be working in 15 years, right? But the mean time to failure for software representations is like 5 years, right? And this idea that AI is going to make us live forever is really bizarre, right? But people are really putting vast amounts of money into it. Yeah, these guys had that same desire. Sorry, that should have come earlier in the build, right? So back to definitions again. I'm not going to say, and again, this is not everybody's definition of ethics by a long shot. But for the context of this talk, I'm not going to say that ethics is doing the right thing at the right time. I already called that intelligence. I'm going to say that ethics is a set of behaviors that allows you to maintain a society, right? So it allows you to keep collaborating and working together. And that includes defining the society. So some of the behaviors that we consider extremely important ethical behaviors are more about differentiating ourselves from others, right? I mean, some of them are really important to, coherence, like, not murdering and not stealing and things like that. But some things about exactly what you eat or wear or things like that are more about self and other, right? So explicit ethics relies on culturally evolved concepts like responsibility, causality, and intention. And this is different, back to the implicit, explicit, right? So we have a set of ethics where we can talk about, where we say you're responsible for something. And my claim here is that's not an idea that existed before humans invented it, right? So we're in a different era now, but quite a lot of the other stuff, like theft, you think theft is bad? So do monkeys. And if you take something off a monkey, you're in trouble with the entire colony, right? They're really, really obsessed with it, like ownership, possession is ownership, right? That is a basic monkey rule, right? So, so some of our rules we share with monkeys, but we also have the idea that of these kinds of things, all right? And I'm going to claim that that's when a nonlinearity happened, and that nonlinearity is what makes AI not a part of human society, not necessarily converging to being equals with humans. Okay. All right. So I'm sorry, this isn't as coherent as it should be, but we'll just keep going. So in 2011, the UK actually the retreat was in 2010. What happened in 2011 was the UK became the first country with a national level AI ethics document, which was called the Principles of Robotics. Now, it's not a law, and now they call it soft law. It's sort of like a policy that, a target, okay? So, but in late 2010, what happened was that the EPSRC, which is the funding council that pays for, among other things, AI, held a retreat in this gloomy house in the New Forest, which is in the south of England, and they brought a bunch of people there, like really quite a lot of people, like 60 people for like 3 or 4 days in this nice hotel, gloomy nice hotel, right? So the idea was that they were worried that the UK public was going to do the GM thing. This is a constant fear of things now. That's genetically modified foods, right? They're worried they're going to exclude robotics when they thought that in fact robotics was going to be critical to the economy, and they wanted to ensure that a broad church of stakeholders thought that they were having a reasonable discussion. And they also had a particular guy who we were mentioning at lunch actually, that was earlier today, sorry. A particular person that had caused a lot of trouble by saying that robots were going to take over, and they were trying to train us how to handle this in the press. Okay, so here's the pictures. So that's Alan Winfield, and that's Maggie Bowden, and Vivian, what's her name? She's a television personality that was chairing it. But anyway, it was all kind of dire. But but we came up with these principles of robotics. And the first 3, which was the academics, because we had been away from our jobs for 3 days, and we're just like, we need something to show. The EPSRC seemed to just want to have the meeting. But anyway, so the first 3 of these basically revise Asimov's laws, which everyone thinks solves AI ethics and doesn't at all. The whole point of all the Asimov stories is about how they're mutually incoherent. But also they're combinatorically impossible. This whole idea that the robot would immediately know the probability of saving, the Will Smith or from, whatever. Yeah, it's just like, okay. So the first 3 laws is like, look, it's artifacts aren't the persons, it's the manufacturers that have standard responsibilities, all right? And then the 4th and 5th are more about the rights and responsibilities of the consumers. Okay. So here's the first one. See if you've memorized Asimov's laws, you can see if you can recognize these. So now the interesting thing here, this was actually a pretty big controversy. We just wanted to say they couldn't kill it all because we're all, hippie left-wing academics. But there were military people there, and they told us, look, there's already robots, and it's not just the military people, it's also the government people. They're like, because the UK is like the 5th largest arms dealer in the world, right? And so they said, if you make a set of principles that we're already violating, then there's going to be no traction. How can you do that? And that's when I learned there's a rule that's like, a law you can't enforce is a bad law. Like, there's no point in just having some, law. It's not law. You can have, some principle, I guess. But anyway, so, and I later learned, much later, it was actually when, do you remember when the police in Texas used a robot to blow up a guy that was shooting policemen? The thing is that it turns out there's a qualitative difference between military and civilian contexts. In a civilian context, policing is not being a soldier. A police person cannot kill another person unless their own life is in direct danger, direct and immediate danger. And whereas if you're in the military, you can call in strikes and try to get your army out to do these things. So there's this context of a battlefield where it's okay to kill people that you don't have an immediate threat over. And if you think war is moral, then this is moral, right? Okay? So it was immoral to have the robot go and blow up the guy, but they felt like they're in an impasse, but basically it was against the laws of policing because there was no police person in immediate threat when they're steering this robot at them, right? But there have been like one or two other cases like that. There's a case where the police in Philadelphia dropped a bomb on a building and burnt down a lot of affluent black people's houses. Anyway, but they in the 80s. But there's not too many cases where you see that happen. Anyway, so this does make more sense than it does appears. But anyway, that's the do not kill thing. But again, see, it's not the robot not killing. It's that we're not going to sell things for civilian purposes that are designed to kill or harm humans, right? Yeah.
So it says primarily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, the thing is,
this is a non-statement.
Well, no. The primarily thing is it's less of a non-statement in British English than American or German English. The thing is, no, seriously, the British English is the subtle thing. Actually, Japanese is similar. There's an island thing. Anyway, if a robot falls on you, you can die, and there's nothing we can do about that. So the point is that it can't be like one of those purposes that you sell it for. But it's, you could be electrocuted by somebody throwing an eyebow into the bathtub with you or something. There's always creative people can figure out ways to kill things.
But it's not like I can design a robot that dispenses candy or kills people as like a backup.
Well, no, but if it dispenses candy and then you put cyanide in the candy, then it's killing people, right? So the point is that the primary purpose was supposed to be something that was not fatal, right? All right, so we're going to get through this how easy I can see. Okay, so humans, not robots, are responsible agents. And this was interesting because someone stuck in the privacy thing, which indeed has turned out to be the biggest deal. It wasn't in the original conception, but it was another tag on that was really useful. And then robots are products, so they have to be designed using processes which assure their safety and security, right? So this is the one about the robot taking care of itself after the first two. But we're just saying, no, they're a safe product, and we have to make it to be a safe product. Okay, this is the one that's a big deal. The robots are well, they're all big deals in their way, but this one is, the idea is that they shouldn't deceive or exploit vulnerable users. Their machine nature should be transparent. And so there's a lot of stuff right now about it because of that previous thing. People want to have robots. They want to believe the robots are people. You get telephoned by robots that you think are people. Actually, do you know this Kantian principle about that you shouldn't kick dogs because whatever God thinks about dogs, and God was one who determined ethics at this point. I don't have to figure out what a dog's moral status is directly because I've noticed that the people who are willing to kick dogs are also willing to kick people. And so basically to the extent that we identify with a dog, we should treat the dog well so that we treat people well too. Okay? And so I'm bringing this back to annoying robots that call you with sales calls. I have to say one of the reasons that I've seen this being a valid argument is that you get really good at hanging up on robots, and then it's harder and harder to tell if the person calling you is a robot, and then you stop caring. Right? Because it's a sales call, and you can tell it's a sales call. So I think I am treating human sales callers worse since I got used to hanging up on robots that piss me off because I'm a professional roboticist and I mistook it for a person for a while, But anyway, so there's this issue about whether or not it should be legal, because if they're fooling me, a professor in AI, then how many, elderly people or whatever are getting their time wasted thinking they're talking to a person, right? However, a lot of people want that. As we know, they want to have products that they believe are like human-like, or they want to have operators that sound like real people that keep you on the phone, right? So this has been extremely controversial. And then finally, the person with legal responsibility for robots should be attributed, which is like, it means there's always someone who's just, any robot, somebody or some company, some legal person is responsible for them. And that has turned out to be a really big deal with the drones, because people are just flying drones into things and nobody knows whose fault it is. So they are starting to license these things, even though they're super cheap. So this one looked like the least likely one for a while, and has become one of the most put into a law thing. So now we're working more on this one. This is the issue. And I was going to say, even though these were British, principles that were sort of on a web page and might have gotten forgotten, even though the EPSRC doesn't enforce them with its grants, they have been getting more and more take-up now. The IEEE Standards Association has incorporated them, these principles. The British Standards Institute's robotics guidance incorporated them. So if you look at Asimov's Laws Wikipedia page, it mentions them. And I didn't put that there. All right. So that was this background about the fact that there may be dangers, like, for example, privacy invasion, whatever. And there is definitely AI. So now I want to talk about more practically. I've just been asserting we shouldn't make robots that are human-like. And then again, one of the problems here is people just assume if it's intelligent, then it's human-like. And I hope that I've been convincing you that those two things don't follow necessarily from each other. So now the question is, what does it actually mean to be human? And is it okay to build robots towards that identity? Okay, so that's supposedly the bulk of the talk that we're already halfway through. So one thing is just the moral hazard. Okay, so we're basically pre-programmed to think humanoid robots are people, and this is a result about a 6-month-old baby. But actually, there's results showing even for just statues that people behave differently if there's a statue in a public space that reduces crime, right? It's just the feeling of other people being around, right? So we're again at this implicit level, we feel we're in a social context and we behave differently, right? And given that we're going to have that problem, we're going to have this confusion. If you make a humanoid robot, or if you start, or any kind of humanoid AI, well before we've actually made a person, people will think we've made a person, right? And so then we have this situation, which I have Angela Merkel there to represent a politician. I used to actually have a picture of Schwarzenegger too, but because he's also a politician, right? Or he was. But anyway. So both political and economic exploitation. So for example, that you can blame the robot for blowing up the village instead of blaming the person who deployed the robot to blow up the village, right? So this is, in fact, I got way more. I used to think this identity confusion was just sort of a weird thing, and I wrote about it, back in the 90s. But it was when George Bush gave Ron Arkin, not personally, but anyway, the Bush administration gave Ron Arkin a lot of money to make ethical military robots, that I got really worried and cranked up my own publication rate on this. And that happened before the EPSRC principles thing. I think that was how it came to their attention. But it was specifically because I was worried that people were going to do what the Bush administration had already done in Abu Ghraib, where they were blaming the privates. And the privates did culpable things. They should not have done those things. But those privates that did those awful things at Abu Ghraib were not even proper military. They were National Guards people. They should never have been sent there. And the people who made the decision to send inappropriately trained people and give them too much power to be able to do horrible things were at least as culpable, I would say more culpable, than the people who did the things, right? They sort of did it indirectly. And so I was very afraid that that was what people were trying to do with the AI when I heard about these ethics chips for military robots.
Ethics chips?
Yeah, have a look at Ron Arkin for a counter view to this. Okay, so yeah, again, if we don't think that AI is already here, then we don't think that AI could possibly have altered our behavior in Facebook. You guys probably know about this. I remember this game. It was really cool. And I remember when they told us about the pathologies that we were most likely to have, and it was really accurate for me and my partner and the only other friend that was stupid enough to show their pathology on Facebook. So anyway, they had these things. They got a huge amount of data about people's Big Five because people just gave them, they just filled in the Big Five tests. They thought it was fun. And then they looked at these people and what they liked, and they figured out the correlation. Right? Pretty straightforward, basic machine learning, right? And then, and this is like, you could say, well, this is allegations about whether or not this happened in these elections, but this stuff is all scientifically published. I mean, they've got a paper PNAS from like 2015 showing that they can do this, right? You know? So you identify users as susceptible to advertising target. All you have to do for the election is tell them, stay home, if you target the right people. Because it's really easy to get people not to take the time to go vote, right? So, in a period like now, when you have high wealth inequality, you tend to have high political polarization, and you tend to have 50-50 elections. So if you could just keep a small number of people from feeling that they're already disenfranchised, or get them to vote for a third party, right? Then you can swing an election, right? And the interesting thing is that the allegations are that the interesting thing is Mercer over here. He's not only rich, but he is a great NLP hacker, and he actually got the European Association of Computational Linguistics, like Lifetime Achievement Award back in the 90s because of some contribution he made. Then he made a bunch of money off of it, and then he had this company, Cambridge Analytica, and they donated their resources to the Leave campaign, which is illegal, incidentally, unless that was worth less than $20,000. And then they sold exactly the same kinds of resources for $6 million to Trump. All right? But then it turns out that he and Trump both got money from the same source. That's all very weird. So anyway, so that's the kind of thing I was worried about. and I literally have a paper from 2015 talking about this kind of thing. Yes?
So just to confirm, you said that Cambridge Analytica gave the services for free to the Leave campaign?
Right, to the Leave campaign, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. These people were like, Princeton and Cambridge professors.
Cambridge, there are Cambridge professors, yeah.
Yeah, one of them after
Yeah, that's right, yeah. Right, well no, the people who did the research are still in Cambridge, right? The Cambridge Analytica, well like John Rust, I've heard him give a talk, right? The Professor Rust.
Well, Kaczynski is in Princeton.
Yeah, okay. Is he?
Kaczynski, yeah.
Okay, right, okay. No, Stanford. He said Stanford. You're thinking Stanford. Yeah. And but again, he's allegedly not getting money from them. It was his research, and he's the one who has the PNAS paper. But the allegations are that the Cambridge Analytica took that stuff, which it was science, it was published, right? But that they took that stuff and that they took some of the data, maybe, and everybody's trying to figure out who gave whom what data and whatever. But anyway, yeah, there was another hand over here. Or should we keep going? Okay, all right, let's keep going. All right. Yeah, so language or empathy don't make an agent moral, okay? And this is weird. All these, these things were really correlated with the moral agents, right? And the moral agent for us is an adult human, right? But all these things have made us feel like, that they were all correlated with it. And the question is it causal, right? Do you guys know the difference between agent and patient? So a moral patient is something like, some people say that these are tied, right? And I actually think the people who tried to tie them together, like the Roman citizens who are trying to prove that they should be taken care of the most by the law. Because basically our intuitions are usually that the less of an agent someone is, less they're able to change things, the more they need to be looked after. And I think that might be part of the reason people think robots are moral patients, because they're pretty hopeless. but anyway, but we do have moral patients that are not agents. For example, the environment. So we think that we need to take care of the environment. We're obliged to the environment, but we don't consider it responsible for its own actions. Same for like babies, right? We don't think babies are responsible for their actions. But anyway, so the question is that for millions of years, those things were the stuff that mattered. And now that we have AI, we're taking all these pieces apart, and so we're saying, well, which of them actually matter, all right? And I'm just asserting this is fact. This is an assertion that isn't the key component. A lot of people, when I say that, think that I just hate robots. So this is just my pictures to show you I don't hate robots. See, I took these pictures. Aren't these cute? And doesn't it show that I have empathy for the robot? Who doesn't feel bad for the poor robot having field surgery here in the middle of the demo, right? But robots aren't people. They're There isn't a single thing it is to be a robot. Not that it's exactly a single thing to be a person. But you don't get to say when you're a parent, like, how many end effectors do you want, or should she have LiDAR? You don't choose the components. You think she should have LiDAR? Yeah, okay. Well, she can buy it, but the most essential thing here is that, well, one of the many essential things that's going to be important for the rest of the argument is nothing you can do, however well you raise her or whatever. If she's socially excluded, it's bad for her. She actually has a higher level of infection. She has a shorter life expectancy if she's social status matters a lot. And that's something it's not just about her. That would be like fish. Any species that's evolved to be social is taking it as something wrong if it's being excluded, right? There's no reason to build that kind of thing into an AI, right? Or into a robot. Those are things that we can choose. I mean, the only reason is if you thought that you wanted to use evolution to create the robots, which is, that we'll get to talk about. And this is going back to this position about the innovation of the concept of responsibility. Now that we know ourselves to be responsible, which is still something like it's discovered, now that we've defined ourselves as being responsible, by what right, when we've got complete authorship over a system, do we push our responsibility to the agent, right? And I'm not saying we can't do that. We could easily construct a system where we do push that responsibility to the robot. So that is a possible future, and it's one the European Parliament has asked the European Commission to consider. But what my talk is arguing is it's not a very good outcome, and I've still got a few more minutes to show you why, and then we can argue about it afterwards. Okay, so yeah, artifacts aren't animals. All right, number 2. We'll go faster after this. This is actually, well, as I said, people think I hate robots, but from the very first paper I wrote, I've done the second order moral patency. Why would or should we create something to know the human experience, given that we're going to own them and given that we're going to build them and whatever. So I think we're obliged to build robots. We're not obliged to. A lot of people think this is a double standard, but it's not. I'm saying for whatever standard, don't build that. You choose the standard of what a moral agent is or a moral patient, and just don't go there. Okay, so these other guys are not me, but they've come to the same conclusion. At least one of them out of the military literature. It's quite interesting papers. Anyway, I'm going to skip this because I'm behind. Let's see. So, yeah, we've talked about this before, and so I can go through this pretty quickly too. Some of the things that we're losing are things like privacy and individual autonomy. That was what we were just talking about with the Facebook thing, right? Thinking that AI isn't here yet, or that we haven't achieved human level AI yet, or all those sorts of things, means that we don't consider it one of the possible things that might be altering our society and something we need to deal with, right? So thinking of it as a person, yes, it's true we don't have human-like AI, but we do have human-level AI. And in fact, massively superhuman AI, and it's altering society, right? This is all push out into the future. Maybe I don't have time for this now. I think the main issues are sustainable inequality, but I don't think I have time to talk about it. Okay. Should I skip this, or do you guys want to hear this? Are you any Boston fans here?
What things?
Do you believe in the superintelligence and the intelligence explosion? No? Okay, let's skip it then. But this is my claim here is that basically we since we've had writing, I will go back and show you that. Since we've had writing 10,000 years ago, before this, there were more macaques than there were hominids. We did not evolve from monkeys. Monkeys evolved more recently than us, and they were winning. All right, they were actually better. They were better suited to moving into novel environments and everything. And the macaques were like doing really well. And then 10,000 years ago, we got all kinds of things: agriculture. What is it called? Anyway, more organized religion, monotheistic religion, but also that where you would talk to people from outside your kin group about your religion and try to win them over to your religion. Urbanization. And you can find people that will write books saying any of those matter. And just because I'm an AI person, I'm going to tell you that the core thing is writing, I think. It's my guess because it allows us to innovate more. Once you've written something down, you don't have to worry about forgetting it, so you don't have to sit there and rehearse it. Anyway, 10,000 years ago, this is a log scale. I mean, look, humans, that's the intelligence explosion, right? So I would say writing is the first AI. It's an off-board memory system, and since we've had AI, we've been just taking over the world, which includes there's actually more biomass on the planet since the Industrial Revolution because we've dug up the other energy sources, right? But on the other hand, there's a lot less biological diversity, and some of that did happen before 10,000 years ago. But again, these are large scales, and we're just wiping out anything that we don't either eat or play with. And if you don't like looking at a lot of science papers, then we can have XKCD, which is as usual. And this is like 2003 data. I guarantee it's much worse than this now. There's a lot fewer elephants, right? But the green is all the wild mammals that were left on the land. We're not counting whales, but of course we know whales aren't doing that well either. But for land mammals, this is us, this is the apes, and this is the cows, right? And the joke here is that Bostrom has something about like an AI that turns the whole world into paper clips because it's trying to organize things for us. But I have, if you show this in a philosophy room, I've literally have had people start laughing and going, "Oh, where are the paper clips?" before I even put up the build there. But anyway, so yeah, all right. So that's 3. Which is, if you recall, that was all about that we're distracting from the real things that we are changing with AI already. I think there's a problem with the ethical coherence, and this is the key thing that, again, I'm trying to get this publication done this year and really start arguing with the ethicists. Because again, I just had this weird thing of seeing people, I didn't really tell you that weird robot looking at his hand earlier that I said, people want. That was when I had got into AI ethics, because I was working on that robot. It didn't work at all. And people would just walk up and say, "Oh, it would be unethical to unplug that." And I'd be like, "Well, it's not plugged in." Right? And they'd be like, "Well, if you plugged it in," I said, "Well, it doesn't work." And they didn't say this about the other working robots that were lying around, right? It was just the one shaped like a person, right? And so I thought that it was because nobody understood AI. I've come to the conclusion it's because nobody understands ethics. And so now this is, again, is me working, and I know there's a whole other, lots of smart people working in this field and have been for a long time, but I still think there's progress that can be made by going in and trying to work with them. I actually think, well, so if it isn't intelligence or having a face or having a voice, what is it? I think really it's more like Nash equilibrium, right? It's about a whole bunch of agents trying to have to cooperate that are basically equals and coming up with a system where they can all work together and then actually produce public goods that help them compete against the other species and, dominate the planet or whatever. Just try to stay alive and persist. That's what life tends to try to do. And so basically there isn't anything other special except the fact that we're a part of this society, right? And so then that, of course, begs the question, should we make AI a part of that same society? All right, and that's going to be reason number 5. We'll get there. But this one is just trying to deal with this really. When I wrote the slide 2 years ago, I didn't realize how weird it is, and now I'm still trying to communicate it a little better. But and this is the bond testing hypothesis. This guy is the genius who also did Zahavi. Is the same guy who did the thing about the peacock's tail, the costly signaling. But he also showed that there's you spend a lot of time with people just trying to make sure that you can trust them. Right, and he has a theory that was why kids throw fits and things. They're trying to figure out the exact limits of what the strength of the relationship with their parents. And this is actually my group. We do work also in this area of understanding public goods investment. But let's see. Yeah, society defines and enforces responsibility often through punishment. And there's this great paper by Soderman that came out in 2016. I was about to say last year, but I've updated. About the fact that you can't enforce responsibility without punishment, and the punishment that we've evolved, however you want to think about it. I mean, again, the chimpanzees pound on each other if they violate rules. So we kind of share that with them, but we've got more sophisticated versions too, right? So all these things, the evolution of suffering, shame, not wanting to be alone in jail, not wanting to lose part of your life, not see your kids for however many nights. that's inextricable from being a human or an ape or a dog. Dogs hate being alone. Do not leave your dog. Sorry if you have a dog home alone, right? Talking about this, but we're social animals, and you should have 2 dogs. You've got one, right? We're social animals, or bring them into work if you can get a job like that. That works really well. I used to think that was weird, and now I know it's normal. Anyway, sorry, digressing too much. So there's no way you can extract that from a social animal, but with AI, it's almost impossible to create something that's inextractable. Now you might think, what if you do deep learning or something like that? But my claim is that in good AI that you can deal with, it's incoherent to think of adding a suffering module, right? And I'm not saying deep learning can't be a component of good AI. I'm saying that deep learning an entire organism would not be a good thing to do with commercial AI. All right. Okay. If you did deep learn an entire organism, and I'm not saying I believe that's tractable, but if you did do whole brain uploading or something, you'd basically be cloning. And then you'd be owning a human being, and of course we're British, so we can get out of this soon, but it's illegal by the European human rights law to clone human beings, right? And I would actually argue it's unethical. You don't own someone you own. Okay, so this is the thing that came out last year. I think this is really as big of a deal as nearly as big a deal as the science paper. The one thing is that I hope that this is limited in time, whereas the science paper is actually something absolute about semantics. But if you assign responsibility or personhood to artifacts, then what you're doing is allowing organizations to avoid their liabilities. All right. So you're basically saying to a big company, say BMW, say Renault, that you can take a part of your business process, fully automate it, and then cap your legal and tax liabilities. You can say they're talking about literally doing this, like endowing a car with a certain amount of money, and then just saying, well, since we can't know what it's going to do because it's got machine learning turned on, we need our liabilities limited. Now, there are other ways. There are real problems with liability in driverless cars. And the real problem goes like this. It's called inequality. And literally all the money in the world is piled up with Google and Apple, right? It's just going there. I wouldn't say all the money in the world. That's a complete exaggeration. But a disproportionate amount of money because it's a new business thing. That the internet is a new business thing, and we haven't figured out how to regulate it yet. So now these companies have a lot of money, and they have said, of course the driverless cars will be the ones who are liable. And I can understand that the European car manufacturers, who don't have as much money as Google and Apple, that have pensions and everything else, are saying, well, that's not fair, right? So I totally get that, but this is not the way to solve the problem, right? This doesn't benefit society to have the ordinary people who get hit by a car able to have the car go bankrupt and then nothing happens to the company that produced it, because the company that produces it, and this is why the thing about it, I totally respect. I think Google and Apple are right to take on the liability because even if you have learning components, you can still have other processes that are ring fencing and making sure that you're within tolerances. You can have ideas of what's okay and what's not okay. And the legal system, the issue here, this is about the legal system too. We could expect, say, that there's going to be 1/10 as many people killed by cars with driverless cars than with driven cars. But it's going to be a different 10th. It's not like we're saving 90% of the lives and then we lost a few. It's going to be a different 10%. And so those individuals who get hit by those driverless cars, the question is what happens. And actually, we geeks are sitting around going, oh gosh, that's a really hard problem. And the lawyers are like, oh yeah, this stuff happens all the time with technical innovations. Stop feeling so special. So most of the lawyers have actually helped. But again, this has to do with who has power and how you get it worked out. And this is actually a case where I think it's good that the tech giants have power because they'll help make sure the laws get set up in a sensible way. But anyway, the point is, this is a bad way to do it. Making an AI component into a legal person creates, again, a slippery slope argument. And this is actually already a problem, and I hope, again, that because now we have taken something out and really looked at it and thought about it, this might help us roll back some of the issues we've had with legal personhood for corporations. So it does make sense. The reason why corporations are legal persons is that it makes it easier to do contracting, so it's called a legal fiction. It's just a way to make it easier. And you can actually throw somebody who cares, that has control over the company into jail, right? So the board members and the executives and whatever, they don't want to go to jail, and they don't want to lose all their assets. But with a shell corporation, the people who are making the decisions, don't actually care about the company. Now, I'm sure that the janitors care just as much about their job as in the real companies, right? But there are companies or individuals that set up companies that the entire purpose of them is to go bankrupt, right? To shield, and the case that we describe in the paper here is there was a bunch of tin mines that created something that was liable, that was supposed to handle all the issues of health that derives from tin mines. And then that thing went bankrupt, and then all the tin mines are like, well, hey, that was the thing that was liable, our liabilities are gone, right? And that happened with no AI. And we're saying it's going to be even worse with AI. And so basically the paper says, here are the arguments for it, here's the arguments against it, and the arguments against it outweigh the arguments for it. It's not that there's no arguments for it, it's that they're not strong enough to motivate increasing this problem. Okay. And I have to say, this is my personal nightmare, is that, again, we want so badly to live forever that, somebody is going to get a huge amount of power, is going to freak out about dying, is going to hire some AI genius to make a chatbot that answers email the same way they do, more or less, right? It's going to die, and we're all going to be left with some chatbot, a crappy chatbot, repeating the bad autocratic inclinations of some trillionaire, right? So that would be my biggest nightmare, and I think this is one of the reasons you don't want to have that. I don't think that's in the. I don't remember if we managed to put that in the paper. Anyway, so yeah, I think I already talked about this. Actual persons, and then and originally citizens and landowners, but we've been expanding it, and you can see, yes, you could and might, we may in our lifetimes expand it to AI. But what I'm arguing against it is that we don't do this. I already said this in the previous slide. I forgot this slide was here. So, that's what I just already said. So the EP is already saying, should we do this, right? So, and this is based on this idea of recompense. So a lot of people, it's really interesting when you look at it. You can actually get something back. If somebody steals your car, the police can find it and give you your car back, and you just actually have it back, right? Or if somebody does damage to the car, they could pay you enough money that you could then go and get it fixed, right? But quite a lot of law is about dissuasion. It's not just about getting that money back. That's why people get, $10 million for being scalded by McDonald's. It's not because they deserve $10 million for the scald. It's because otherwise McDonald's is just going to keep scalding people. You need to make it expensive enough that McDonald's stops doing that. And it's weird because when you throw somebody, you've lost your wife or something, and then the murderer goes to jail, and somehow you feel like you got something. And that again shows how we sort of culturally and maybe even biologically evolved to feel like we've got something, when actually what we've done is dissuade someone from doing the similar thing again, right? So yeah, the folk psychology confounds these, but it's implausible in built, well-designed, and maintainable AI that we would have that would really dissuade the system somehow through human justice. So it's another reason to think, let's not have the AI as a human, let's have it as an extension of a human for which humans are responsible. And so I think either we have to completely reinvent justice, or we need to keep AI as an extension of individual or corporate human capacities. All right, so I've actually already said this, so I'm going to skip through this. AI heaven, I love the idea of AI heaven, but you get this idea, right? So, right. I thought I didn't have enough slides, and I was wrong. Should I tell you about this? I talked about Sahavi already. So I think the robots, again, this is one of the things, people think that they've got this robot dog, and they forget that their data is up in this hackable cloud, right? And that they're not dealing with a dog, they're dealing with something that's like a giant corporation or a government. Sometimes, I was on a talk right after someone from Google said, oh, security is going to get fixed. Do you guys remember this video? Actually, again, this is no reason we shouldn't put this on the web. I just remember that. This is a Snowden slide, and this means that nobody foreign should see it. So please don't put it on the web. But anyway, this was one of the Google slides, which is actually the Google slides, the Twitter slides that showed that the Snowden slides that showed that after Google had already signed up to be in PRISM, the NSA hacked them anyway. And before they saw this slide, they kept the stuff that they were doing in-house unencrypted because it's expensive to encrypt, right? But now it's encrypted in-house too, because everybody gets hacked, right? So, and Google has the best security in the world, as far as I know, right? So yeah, but the U.S. federal government gets hacked, political parties, banks, cheap apps, and LinkedIn all get hacked, right? So basically, I'm just saying, yeah, this is not. You don't want people thinking that you have a cute speaker in the middle of the room that can give you music that you want on, and forget that data is going out and possibly going to blow up. All right. So yeah, we want to trigger this implicit identification because it gets people to like our robots more. But I think explicitly, at least, we want people to understand robots are not people, so they can make informed decisions like turning them off at night. Yeah, right. And I think they ought to do the right thing, or else I'm going to call my lawyer friends. All right. So at Bath, I promise I tell you a little bit of our work. We actually have shown that if you this is an IDE for the AI to set the priorities between the different modules depending on the context. But if you just expose this to even ordinary users, they do actually get a better understanding of the robot. So we're now going to see whether humanoid form interferes with that process or not. And that's what AXA is doing. All right. So that's all what I was going to say, except for this. Artificial intelligence is to moral agency as artificial flaws are to the ecosystem. All right. And that you should read this if you want to know more about the law. Because I can't do a law very well in a talk, because I'm not a lawyer. But the other two authors were, and it's a decent law paper. Okay, thank you.